The Positive Pause is a motivational-minded podcast covering topics women want to know about as they journey to and through menopause, focusing on subjects that impact women's health and healthy aging, including what it means to age healthfully. The Positive Pause features experts and influencers from a variety of industries and specialties. The information and opinions expressed on the Positive Pause are not intended to replace the services of trained professionals or to provide specific medical advice. To see the National Menopause Foundation's full medical disclaimer, please visit nationalmenopausefoundation.org.
Welcome to the Positive Pause. I'm Claire Gill, founder of the National Menopause Foundation. Joining me today is Leslie Kenny, co-founder of the nonprofit Oxford Longevity Project and founder of Oxford Healthspan. Leslie's life dramatically changed in her 30s when she received a very serious diagnosis and was told she only had a few years to live. She refused to accept this and worked to transform her health by eliminating inflammatory triggers and supporting her body's natural healing. Thankfully, Leslie's now 60 and she empowers women with science of aging well, especially during perimenopause and menopause, when immune shifts, fatigue worsens, and hormonal volatility can leave many of us feeling out of sync. Through the Oxford Longevity Project, Leslie breaks down the latest research on cellular renewal, immune health, mitochondrial function, and autophagy, translating it into practical insights for women navigating life after 40. Thank you so much for being with me today, Leslie.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you.
So I purposely didn't read up all of the things that happened to you in your 30s when the introduction, because I wanted you to tell it in your own words. So tell me a little bit about what happened with your diagnosis and what you were diagnosed with and how that changed your life.
So I guess a lot of us working in this space, I have an origin story, a kind of heroine's journey, and mine started 21 years ago when I was age 39. I was in the middle of my 5th round of IVF. I had not had any children then, and my husband and I were desperate to have a baby. We had taken the extraordinary step of deciding to use donor eggs. And for some people, it takes a while to get to that point. But we had found someone, also not easy because I'm biracial. I'm mixed race, Asian and Caucasian. And around that time, I noticed pain in my hands. I was having difficulty turning faucets, doorknobs, using scissors. And I thought, it feels a bit like arthritis, but I'm only 39. It's obviously not that. Nevertheless, I've got this IVF round coming up. I need to check this out. So let's go to the doctor. Probably about a week later, I got a call with my doctor at the other end of the line saying, your test results are back and can you come in to have a chat about them? And when I did, we all know that's not
Never
the person,
sign,
right? Never a good sign. You don't want to hear from the doctor. You don't want them to not tell you what's going on. And as she said, you do have arthritis. It's rheumatoid arthritis. And we luckily are able to give you immune suppressing injections. You'll be able to do this yourself. They're tiny diabetic needles, and that will stop your immune system from overreacting and destroying your joints. That's that pain that you're feeling is the destruction of your joints. And I said, okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. At the same time, I'm thinking, how does this impact my IVF?
Right.
And then she said, but you also have lupus. Now, this I'd never heard of. She said, this is attacking your organs and tissues and destroying them. That did sound bad, but still don't know exactly what it means. So I just said, what's the solution to that? And she said, unfortunately, there isn't one. And we don't have anything to treat this with. So this was in 2004. And I said, but wait, I've got this IVF round going. I need to fix this. And she said, you should expect it to get worse over time. And I thought, I really don't have time for it to get worse over time. Actually, I need it to get better over time. when she said, "I'm sorry, there really isn't anything," this very angry, entitled medical consumer in me who thinks that this is transactional with the doctor, right? I have a
Right.
worn out part. You fix it. This is like
Yeah.
going to the auto garage, right? I said, "You're the expert. I'm the client. I'm paying you. So you have to fix this because I've got an embryo transfer." And she just looked at me and said, "I wouldn't do that IVF. I wouldn't proceed with it. You've only got a good 5 years left." And when I heard that, I really didn't know what to say. You really have no comeback,
Right.
especially when an authority figure does this.
Yeah.
I sort of stumbled out of there thinking, is that true? This is what Brene Brown always says. Ask yourself, the
Yeah.
thoughts in your head, are those really true? And here she was telling me something that was really devastating. I thought, it only stands to reason that a patient who doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, and who isn't stressed should do better than a patient that has all of those things against them. I heard the voice of my grandmother, long deceased at that point, but a really can-do Midwesterner from the state of Indiana, who just in my head said, "Let's throw the kitchen sink in at Leslie." And I thought, yeah, let's do that. Let's really just try and fight this. I was very lucky. I not only completely changed my diet and lifestyle, did a lot of research, but I was very lucky because when I was going through IVF, I had relied on the patient chat rooms and I had learned a lot on those bulletin boards. And I decided I would do the same and go to the rheumatoid arthritis and lupus patient bulletin boards. There, I discovered on the RA patient boards that these drugs I was being given tended to stop working after about a year and a half, and that you kind of went on a never-ending merry-go-round of these drugs. And then on the lupus boards, I discovered that 4 years prior in Germany, a small study with 13 lupus patients had been done using a novel treatment called intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG. And every single one of those patients got better. They all improved. And that was what I needed. That was my hook. It's like climbing a mountain and I needed something to kind of hook into the wall of the mountain and anchor myself so that I could pull myself up. And that was it. And I started looking for doctors who could prescribe me IVIG. My own doctor refused because she said 13 patients is not safe. It doesn't tell us anything. It's too small. But I said, it's what I'm going to die of something. And this, at least, it empowered me, to be really honest. It gave me the sense that I was exercising my agency, and I was able to have an impact on the course of my illness. That can be very important for a patient to not feel helpless.
Right.
Right.
And particularly, like you said, in normal circumstances, especially having worked in healthcare for so long now, I would say the same thing, right? We're always trying to tell people when you look at these studies, it's those kind of things. If it's only 13, please be careful. However, you were given a fatal diagnosis, right? She told you weren't going to live. So in that instance, that's very, very different.
It is very different.
You're looking for that risk equation for you became completely different. So good for you for.
Well, I persisted. I did speak to other immunologists in the United States and in Great Britain, and they cautioned around hepatitis C. So we didn't have a cure for hep C then, and that had been transmitted at a time when people didn't know that it was in blood, right? As was given to, say, hemophiliacs. And a lot of those hemophiliacs then got hep C and there was no cure for it. So there was no cure in 2004 for that. And then there was mad cow disease, and prions are hard to identify in blood. So it was a risk. But as I said, I wanted to exercise agency over my life. I felt so much had been taken out of my control. Also with the IVF and the pregnancy, I just thought, let me do one thing, right?
Right.
And it worked. Within 6 months, I went back for a routine check-in with my doctor, and she had clearly not looked at my notes when she came into her office to meet with me and discuss them, because she opened the folder and just said very plainly, well, look at that. You don't have lupus or RA. I just, excuse me? And she said, all your blood markers have returned to normal. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Do you want to know what I did? And she didn't even look up at me. She just was looking at the file and just said, no, that's okay. And that's when the penny dropped for me.
Yeah.
And I have met other patients who have had this penny drop moment themselves, when you realize that our doctors are amazing when it comes to acute care, but they just do not have the time when it comes to chronic illness to troubleshoot and identify the root cause of our diseases. Nor do they have the time to walk alongside us as we try to fix them and change the things in our life that are modifiable that could have an impact. And that's when I realized patients need to be empowered. And happy ending to the story, age 42, I conceived naturally. I delivered age 43. Even more strangely, I've been in remission for 21 years. It would have cost my insurer over $1.2 million to keep me on immune suppressants. The IVIG 2 rounds was $24,000. And I fell pregnant completely naturally. The other thing is that last year when I took a biological age test, my biological age was said to be 21. Now, I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but what's important about this particular biological age test, which is called the glycan age test, is that it is specifically looking at inflammatory markers. And these are the same markers that indicated I had RA and lupus, and then in the end, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So what's amazing to me is that how can I be older? Those inflammatory markers are all in check and look like that of a young person. I've gotten older. And so we have a chronological age, the number of candles on our birthday cake, but we all have a biological age. And this is linked with Healthspan, because science has allowed us to all live more chronological years, but not necessarily in good health. And I think the last thing, especially we women want, is to be a burden on someone else, right? We're brought up to care for other people.
Right.
But we also financially, do we have the money to have people take care of us with wraparound care? We don't, because we generally earn less than men.
Right.
And yet we are at twice the risk of Alzheimer's than men. And we are much more likely, though we outlive men by 5 to 6 years, we tend to live those 5 to 6 years with a number of chronic diseases. So not necessarily in good health. So my thought is really, let's all try to reverse our biological age. We've been given these extra chronological years from science, but let's do the things we can to modify the risk factors in our life so that we live those last years independently with our faculties in check and being vibrant, right? For me, it's like extra time is being given. And so many of us walk around saying, oh, if only I had more time. Well, now we're being given it and it's exciting, but we have to take the steps, and they're not necessarily major steps, but take some steps to stay in good health for longer.
It's so important. And as you said, I mean, we talk about that a lot when we talk about women's health, that idea that, as you said, we are chronologically living longer and living longer than men, as you mentioned, but not living healthier. And for all of those reasons that you said, one, we don't put ourselves as a priority on our list of things to do. We care for everybody else and not ourselves. And then we become susceptible to additional chronic diseases and different types of conditions at menopause due to loss of estrogen. And so really an important time. at midlife and perimenopause and menopause to take stock, because you said of where are you as far as health span and making sure that you're doing or making changes that can benefit you for the long term. And that's definitely, as we've seen in society, there's far more talk about that, right? And some of the listeners might be familiar with, but let's talk a little bit more about blue zones, books about it, these regions or spots in the world where people are living longer, but they're also living healthier. So can you talk a little bit more about that and how that plays into what you're doing with Oxford?
Yes. So blue zones are fascinating because they are areas that have been identified by Dan Buettner, formerly at National Geographic, as centers of very high longevity, healthy centenarians who continue to engage with their communities, live independently, and to still have their faculties in check. And I think that's something that we all aspire to. Now, there is a blue zone in the United States in Loma Linda, California, which is very exciting for other Americans who are thinking, okay, Sardinia, if you move me to Sardinia, of course I'll live to 100. Well, you don't have to, because right smack in the middle of Los Angeles is a blue zone. These are the Seventh-day Adventists, and they are famous because they don't eat a lot of meat. They have an emphasis once a week. They must all go out for a whole day outside in nature. Now, whether or not that gives them extra vitamin D, which is protective, or if it is a physical movement, they are very engaged and active outside as well as within their community, because of course on Sunday they gather together as well. If you look at societies where women have exceptional longevity, then you have to look at the Okinawans. So the longest lived men are in Sardinia, but the longest lived women are in Okinawa, which is a chain of islands in the southernmost part of Japan. The Okinawans have a very interesting practice like the rest of the Japanese. It's around having a sense of purpose, which is called ikigai. And there's been a book about ikigai and how important it is for us to have a reason to jump out of bed the next day. In Japan, but specifically in Okinawa as well, a lot of this is around community service. So helping others, but also teaching younger generations as well. And this idea of contribution is very important to them. They also have social groups called moai, and these, in some cases, have been around since they were 5 years old, where they were literally assigned to a group of maybe 4 or 5 other young girls, and they have been meeting maybe every week, maybe every month for the last 80 years.
Wow.
And they keep track of each other to the extent that they can say, do you remember that guy that I liked so much when I was 15? And then someone else will say, oh no, he liked me first. It's the bearing witness to each other's lives and honoring that. And I think it's something that we women are especially good at, right?
So true. So true.
We are very good at that bearing witness to, and also keeping in touch and caring for each other through thick and thin. And so moais are something that any of us would be able to create. People actually agree that they will pay in a certain amount of money so that they can meet on the regular. So it's something that, it's like booking a package holiday together, but on a much package holiday light. And you commit to doing this. And I think it's a wonderful idea. In addition to these practices, they also have a lot of functional movement built into their day. So Okinawa itself, it's like the Hawaiian Islands. It's volcanic and it's very hilly. And just as in Sardinia, which is also hilly, people are walking down steep hills and up steep hills, just as a matter of course to get from point A to point B. Well, all of that engages the large muscles of our legs. And the more muscles we have, the more anti-inflammatory myokines we are producing, but we are also improving our blood sugar, our insulin sensitivity by developing more muscle as well. And that's completely built into their day to day. Their diet is also plant-based. And Okinawan women famously do not experience a lot of menopausal symptoms, probably because of the fact they have a lot of fiber in their diet. Sweet potato, taro is a big part of their diet, but they also have a lot of soy isoflavones, which are very helpful with things like hot flashes. And then for bone, for instance, they will eat small fish. So tiny sardines, mackerel, these types of fish, anchovies, if you actually eat them and you cook them the right way, the bones almost disappear. But you're actually eating that, which is very beneficial for our own bones.
Yeah.
And so all of these things are kind of baked into the culture of Okinawan life for these women. And I think a lot of that tracks with their exceptional longevity. There's obviously some things we could learn from them as well around friendship and diet and movement.
Well, as you said, though, there's two things that I take from this. Like one, as you said, this is built into their culture, right?
Yeah.
So they've always done this. And so the hurdle we have in Western culture is overcoming how we've been taught and how we've grown up to be able to, avoid hills.
Yeah.
Right? We're eating more meat. We're eating more processed foods, all of those things that become hurdles, as I said, for us to live longer, healthier. It's kind of part of their culture. But as you said, there's so much about the purpose-driven part of that as well that all science has shown really makes a huge difference. So I kind of feel like half the battle is won in that women are already biologically, I believe, set to be able to do those things, build those long-term friendships, stay in touch with people, be community driven, right? And so continuing to practice those and prioritize those are one thing that we can do to really live that healthier lifespan. And then, as you said, learning from these other cultures about their diet and their movement, so those practices become more routine for us. Let's talk a little bit about the Oxford program. How are you bringing that to life? How do you help women in midlife to start making these changes?
Well, I think that movement is a big part of it. We don't have a lot of movement in modern life. It's very sedentary. And as my fellow colleague and board member of the Oxford Longevity Project, Sir Muir Gray, often says, the chair is actually a kind of toxin to us because we're just sitting all day long when we are actually meant to move. And one of the things that we did last year was we brought a wonderful British broadcaster to the Longevity Project annual summit. Angela Rippon is an ambassador for Alzheimer's UK, but she also started an initiative called Let's Dance and got over 20,000 dance instructors in the UK to volunteer their time over the course of one day in over 2,000 dance studios up and down the United Kingdom to give free dance lessons to people. And one of the things is when you say, oh, I've got to get fit, most of us in the West think, oh, we've got to go to a gym. But none of these centenarian hotspots, none of these blue zones are major gym. There's not a lot of gym activity there. The Okinawans, the Sardinians, the Nicoyans, they're not going to the gym because they have functional movement in their life and they like to do it, or they have to do it. And what Angela Rippon was trying to say with Let's Dance was, this is a social thing. If we're going to move, let's do it because this is joyful. This is fun, right? Let's tap into the inner child that we once were, that love to go outside and just play, right? Or let's have a skipping competition. I think you and I we remember this, right? We used to knock on people's doors and say, you want to come out and play? And we'd chase each other around the block. That was fun. Well, another way to do this would be through dance. And so we really do our best to bring some of these actionable ideas to individuals so that they can make this part of their own lives as well. And one of the main things we've done so far is the annual Smart Aging Summit, which we did at Rhodes House last year. But we also are sending out newsletters to other people, firstly in the Oxford community, Oxford, England community itself, just to say to people, you don't have to accept that you are getting older, because you may be getting chronologically older, but let's focus on biological age, right? Let's focus on the things you can do to move the needle back. So you may get older, but you still feel vibrant and fit. And so those are some of the ways we communicate with people, but we also try to walk our talk. And so one of my fellow co-founders, Sir Christopher Ball, who's a longtime educator in Great Britain, he is 90. He's over 90, I guess 90 and a half now. And on his 90th birthday, he said, okay, I'm going to run a 10K. So he did. And he wants to show people who are older what is possible and really push the envelope on the perception of what 90 is, because there he is. He's a former paratrooper. He's a poet and an educator. And there he is running 10K at age 90. And I think that is really important. He's very engaged in the community, still raising money for younger people. He very much says that those of us who are older, we should be giving back to the community, very similar to what they do in Okinawa around that concept of ikigai. Yeah, exactly. And in terms of what we do for women specifically, we also had Dr. Louise Newson, who is one of the biggest advocates of HRT education here in the UK, speak, and really wanted to focus the spotlight on the benefits around hormones if they are appropriate for you. And you may know that in around 2000, just under 30% of American women who were eligible for HRT were on HRT, the old HRT. Today, in the United States, that number is around 4%.
It's just crazy. Right? Unfortunately, we also did, that part of that was because of the Women's Health Initiative, which we've talked about on here.
Yeah.
The black box warning that was on estrogen, all estrogen, including low dose vaginal. So the
has been lifted, thank goodness. Yeah.
We just need to do more to educate women about what hormone therapy is and its safety and its efficacy. And again, when it's appropriate for you to take it, right? Who should be eligible, right?
Exactly. And so that's very much the work of Dr. Louise Newson. We are hopeful 15% of British women who are eligible for HRT are on it right now.
Well, that's better.
Which is a lot higher than the US. Do you know what percentage of women in Japan are on HRT? We often think, the Japanese, they're aging so much better than us.
I bet you none.
15%.
Oh, 15, really? I was saying, wow, I wonder if because of all their other things that they're doing, they actually do anything. But 15%. So that's a good amount. If we could get from 4 to 15 in the US, we'd be doing very, very well, I guess.
Well, there's very good evidence that replacing hormones actually will de-age us. And I think a lot of women who are on HRT, and certainly myself included, can attest that it was our experience. I'm not saying that I speak for all women. I know not all women find that it agrees with them, but it can de-age you. And it's very obviously cardioprotective, neuroprotective, bone protective. And for all these reasons, it's something that we try to advocate for here in the UK, because frankly, 15% is not
You're
enough,
right.
Right? We need more.
Minimum, right?
Right. Yeah. And this is a public policy issue because the cost of treating or caring for a huge, millions of women with Alzheimer's, this is not sustainable. Society cannot support this. And therefore, it is really important that we get this message to women now, right? Before it's too late. So those are some of the things we do.
Right. It's unfortunate kind of, especially, well, at least here in the US, that's really the impetus for what happened to kind of why are we now finally getting the black box off is, it's economics, because caring about women's health and women's longevity and women's well-being, less of a priority. But the economics, we can't handle what's coming. When those data are presented, then all of a sudden we can take action. But it is important and really came about because women advocated for it.
Yeah. Just like me as a patient. Yeah. And more power to all women to advocate for themselves. And I will just say one last thing with regard to HRT. If a woman has a bad experience with, say, transdermal estrogen, then try a different type. Try a different type and see if it works, or try putting it in a different place, but don't give up entirely. Work with your physician to find a solution, because having spoken to many women, I have met a number of women who I feel may have given up early, or others who have then persisted and found the delivery method that worked for them. Right?
So true. And again, so important to make sure that we continue to do education around this, so women realize the options that are available and the things that they can do. And whether it's, again, for well-being and preventative for bone, as you said, and all of those kind of stuff under our hormone therapy, but even the new non-hormonal options that are available for, at least for symptom, that we should not suffer the way that we think we can. And then, two, I just want to state again, not all women, as you said, not all women experience bad menopausal symptoms. Some women say, oh, I didn't even notice. And that's fabulous. But ladies, that does not mean we should not advocate for it just because it's not happening to us, right? Because it is really impacting so many of our sisters. And we really do need to be unified in this, that women's health matters, and that we need to work together to bring about solutions and to have access to care that gives us the option to make those decisions, whether you choose to naturally go about, managing your symptoms, or having that, what we know is effective and efficient at managing symptoms. And as you mentioned earlier, there's many other benefits to hormone therapy. So I'm so grateful that you're all doing that there in the UK. And we've definitely here in the US looked to the UK for how you've been advancing women's midlife health, and really appreciate you sharing so much of that information and the studies that you're working on and what's working, because we really can pick up these best practices from around the world. And we don't need to recreate the wheel, right? There are things there. And if we just share these resources and take time like this to promote the great work that's being done around the world, we will all benefit so, so much. So as I just want to say, I will make sure that with the notes for this podcast, we'll have links to information about your nonprofit and about the Oxford Longevity Project. And really, again, hope that more people will reach out and find out what you've discovered and what you've been doing in all of your great work. And again, I appreciate so much you being on the podcast to talk us through what you've learned. It was great to meet you too.
Lovely meeting you as well. Thank you very much. And a shameless plug for our annual Smart Aging Summit, which will be on Saturday, the 9th of May, at Rhodes House, home of the Rhodes Scholars globally, at the University of Oxford. So if anyone would like to come, tickets are for sale on our website.
That's fabulous. We'll make sure we have a link to that as well. And so, final thoughts, Leslie, when we think about what one thing you want women to take away about longevity or living healthfully, what would that be?
Invest daily in your long-term Healthspan pension plan.
That is very good advice. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate this. And if you've enjoyed this episode as much as I have, please make sure you subscribe to the Positive Pause podcast so you never miss an episode, and share this information with your family and friends. Thank you again to my guest, Leslie Kenny, co-founder of the Oxford Longevity Project and founder of Oxford Healthspan. And thank you for listening. We hope you tune in to another episode of The Positive Pause.